Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Man at YouTube with another model video. Today we'll be building and reviewing the Modelcollect Fist of War E-100 walking tank with a 360mm Stug Gun. My god, this is a massive piece of fantasy hardware with quite the big gun. The instructions are printed in a beautiful colour with a few colour schemes and fairly clear enough instructions. In an entirely glossy printed book. A set of silky water slide decals, very easy to apply. Small piece of photo etch with the richest in the detail, not sure if that's necessary. And 8 pieces of runners, mostly utilised for the legs and the very large hull. The whole kit goes together fairly easily in theory, but things get a bit complicated as you're applying layer upon layer of parts. This is a very tricky build that I've found to have broken quite a few experienced modelers. I would definitely consider this fairly advanced, as there are some holes in the instructions that are not very clear in how to put this together if you have certain goals, considering if you're coming from the science fiction, Star Wars, gunpla modelling side of things, or if you're a military modeler. The kit is not very articulate friendly, and it is recommended to glue everything down at some stage. It's dry assembling and figuring out the positioning you want of the gun and the legs before committing and gluing down. Plus the whole argument of the paint before assembling argument. I've achieved this to the best of my knowledge with prior armor and tank modeling by assembling as much of the hull and turret as humanly possible and keeping the legs dismantled as much as I can. There is a lot of parts such as pistons and hydraulics, which is ideal to have them slide up and down as you move and pose the legs in the perfect world, but it doesn't quite work out like this in theory. I kind of wish I would have swapped them out for brass rods to negate any sort of gluing seam lines and cleaning up of flash marks. The under Flak 38 Canon plastic pieces are also utterly far too fine, however in proportion, detail and dimension fairly accurate and near perfect to the scaled real counterpart, will snap eventually and cause quite a bit of issue. It would have been nice if there was some sort of brass or metal option, even at a much higher cost. The legs come together snapping one subassembly over the other, leaving a seam right down the center. If you are quite the perfectionist, this will need to be glued and seam line filled, dried and sanded each session, drawing out the build to be a lot longer than necessary, but quite a bit of armor parts are included to hide all that. And the front visible piece, cannon wise, is seen to have an armor joining line, making that acceptable. When you stand back and look at the whole model built, it's very intimidating and just a very awesome piece of toy or tech. The detail is super rich, super deep. It will take a hand painting quite well, and there's all sorts of opportunity for weathering. You have multiple option parts for different guns, but I believe that the tooling lends itself to have different weapons applied. I've decided to have a lot of fun weathering it and making a patchwork mech by targeting different pieces of armor and applying salt and chipping weathering methods to make it look like it's been built in the field, and elements have been serving during the war for quite a long period of time. Once the building stage was complete and not overly too terrible or dissatisfying, the finished result definitely makes it worthwhile. The painting stage was where it at, and I had the absolute most fun. Did shell out a bit of coin. It was a very expensive model, so I definitely wanted it to make an iconic piece worthy for the display cabinet. In the 72nd field, this tank is bigger than most large 35th tanks and outshines anything from super heavies such as a King Tiger all the way to the Mouse. My usual process applied, but breaking down the kit in multiple parts of turrets, hull, legs, additional pieces such as upper armor and feet, I considered this whole project into 5 separate models with completely different goals, but looking and referencing to each parts to make sure the light weathering would combine all together. Each part received a coat of Tamiya primer to make sure there's no faults or seams splitting, applying some sort of silver or undercoat, a clear coat, and allowing more than a week to dry. My favourite being the Guy Note oxidized red, but multiple colours were definitely used, all lacquers, all applied by airbrush. A mix of extra stronghold hairspray applied by brush, so it'd be the pump style hair spray to allow such a thick coat as possible for maximum effect in chipping, and shading multiple coats of whatever colour, if it's a sand desi components for some legs or a military green for other areas, to have a gradient effect. These parts are very large. The larger surface you have to play with, the more likely things will go wrong if it's very plain or there's not a lot of variation, and you start applying weathering, dry brushing, mud, that sort of thing. There's not much to draw the eye, and it's not very realistic. After that subassembly of parts has been painted, I'd run it under running cold water, strip the paint off, the bit of salt, cut the edges with a hobby knife to get some edge wear and tear paint lifting, apply a few decals, weather and scratch, fade those up, apply a clear coat, and then it goes down to multiple levels of mattes, maybe some silks to give it a variation in tone and finish, some weathering pencil, plenty of a variant of washes, some streaks, and a little bit of pigment where there's build-up of dirt and dust, and comparing and flipping and having a look until I had a right amount of build-up of wear, rust, filth, dirt, grime. When each part interconnects, it's giving itself a stylized, almost wargaming look of a cluster of as the Warhammer 40k people put it, ducka ducka. Rust, guns, cannons, big and intimidating. The overall effect was very desirable and fun. Definitely playing with quite a few materials, methods, crackling of clear coat, and products and techniques I have not previously used. Though again, utilizing each cluster of parts as a model kit on its own, more than 12 months has been invested in just being very playful, mucking around and just having fun with each bit of part, creating that much definition and detail. I'm a tad overwhelmed with what's been produced here. The more time and the more thought you put into layering a small subtle amount of stuff can have a very intense look to it. The building part, which I definitely do not necessarily recommend for a beginner or easy build, but looking for something very particular, would lend itself to go for it. However, if you want an excellent walking spider tank, I'd suggest you're better off spending your $70-80 on buying a 72nd or a 35th tank, a few other parts, and scratch build your own original design of the spider tank, unless you're definitely fallen in love and just like this concept enough to build it on its own. It is a bit advanced, and it's going to take a little kit bashing creativity and further scale modeling to make it acceptable for a collector's piece or something you will showcase at a competition. So it's recommended with a note of take care, be careful. Though with the availability of it, you do need to buy it, as these sellouts quite frequently and not necessarily restocked or remanufactured. This was out a few years ago and I've only managed to complete it recently, though I have seen new tooling of different turrets on top. In the way of the effort I've put into it, sometimes when I'm working on multiple models and I want to do a quick easy color or paint something, with the pressure I put on myself, I would put off painting this for quite a while. Though once finished and being as creative and detailed I've been with it, I'm glad I went to the effort of finishing it at the state it's at, and allowing the amount of layers of paint and effect and shading to this degree, and not being afraid to overweather, which normally is seen and met with criticism, though in certain circumstances such as this can definitely be pulled off with the right technique and methods applied on top of each other, making sure that medium and chemicals do not cross-contaminate and cause adverse effects that would lower self-esteem and require stripping of paint. I'm very happy with the effort. I'm glad I didn't burn out. I'm very happy I didn't abandon this build, but I don't think I'm going to build another Modelcollect science fiction fantasy tank for a long time, if not indefinitely. It has taken quite a bit of my time and life unintentionally to reach a piece like this, and I'd rather put that direction in something like a figure or a more expensive specialized resin kit. All in all, thank you very much for watching. As always, until next time, stay tuned for further content. Happy to answer any question in further detail about this build or any other model. Check the description down below for all the social media links, the other channel, and other content that is also created. And we'll catch you guys next time. Stay tuned for more content.